We've actually got two stories to talk about. The first one could completely change the way some fans are looking at this roster heading into camp, and the second involves a player who might end up becoming one of the most interesting additions Detroit made all offseason. There's a lot to unpack, and honestly, both stories say a lot about where this team is heading as it chases a Super Bowl. Before we jump in, if you're a real Lions fan and you're excited to follow this journey with us all season long, do me a quick favor, hit that like button and subscribe to Lions Nation Report. We're a brand new channel with our first goal of reaching 5,000 subscribers, and having passionate Lions fans like you join us would mean everything. Honestly, this is one of those conversations that always makes training camp so fascinating. The Lions have one of the deepest rosters they've had under Brad Holmes, and that's actually creating a problem every team would love to have. There simply aren't enough spots for everyone. With training camp opening in less than a week, Detroit's roster is about as stable as we've seen in years. Most of the starting jobs are already locked up. Outside of the competition at left guard, there really aren't many starting positions up for grabs. Instead, the biggest battles are happening further down the depth chart, where players are fighting just to survive the final roster cuts. That also means some recognizable faces, players we've gotten used to seeing in Honolulu blue, could surprisingly find themselves without a spot on the initial 53-man roster. These wouldn't necessarily be shocking because of poor talent, but because of how much depth Detroit has built at nearly every position. The first name is Levi Onwuzurike. This one probably isn't the biggest surprise, but it's definitely emotional if you've followed his journey. Remember, Levi was Brad Holmes' second ever draft selection back in 2021, taken in the second round. There have always been flashes of the player everyone hoped he'd become. In fact, his 2024 season was easily the best stretch of his career. He finished second on the team in quarterback pressures and looked like he was finally putting everything together. Then came another devastating setback. He suffered a knee injury near the end of that season, and it appears he tore his ACL. Even though the exact severity wasn't completely clear at the time, he still managed to suit up for the playoff game against Washington before ultimately missing the entire 2025 season. One interesting wrinkle that kept him on the roster had nothing to do with football itself. Because of a unique provision in the NFL's collective bargaining agreement, his one-year contract from 2025 was essentially pushed into 2026. The same contractual situation also affected Josh Paschal, although Paschal has already been released. So Levi is still here, but now he faces an uphill battle. When you look at Detroit's defensive line, there are simply too many younger, healthier players competing for those same roles. Ahmed Hassanian, Tyler Lacey, Anthony Lucas, and Skylar Gill-Howard all present serious competition. They can fill similar responsibilities without carrying the same medical concerns. And unfortunately, that's been the story of Levi's career. First, it was the back problems, which finally seemed to be under control. Then came the ACL injury. At some point, the Lions have to ask themselves whether they'll ever consistently get the player they originally envisioned when they drafted him. I still think there's a chance he sticks around, but if you're asking me today, it feels like the odds are working against him. The second player is Trevor Nowatzki. This one is less about performance and much more about simple math. Whenever Derek Barnes missed time at Sam linebacker, Nowatzki stepped in and actually played respectable football. He competed hard, brought energy, and showed he could contribute. The problem is that this linebacker room is absolutely loaded. He's not taking snaps away from Derek Barnes. He's not passing Jack Campbell. He's probably not getting ahead of Jimmy Rolder or Malcolm Rodriguez either. Even if Detroit decides to keep 6 linebackers, the competition doesn't stop there. You've also got undrafted rookie Eric Hunter, veteran Joe Bache, and Damone Clark, who many believe has the strongest chance of earning that final linebacker spot. Nowatzki's biggest strength has always been playing that Sam linebacker role and occasionally creating pressure as a pass rusher. But his coverage ability remains a question, and versatility matters when coaches are trying to squeeze every ounce of value out of the final roster spots. Honestly, this is what happens when your roster becomes a legitimate contender's roster. Good players sometimes get squeezed out simply because there are even better options around them. If Detroit does move on, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they immediately tried bringing Nowatzki back to the practice squad because he's proven he can help when injuries inevitably happen during the season. Then we get to what might be the biggest surprise of all, Brock Wright. I think most Lions fans automatically assume Brock Wright is safely locked in as the number 2 tight end behind Sam Laporta. But when you really dig into the numbers and look at how this roster is built, that assumption may not be as safe as people think. Brock has always been a solid player. He's had some memorable moments, including those occasional explosive plays that get everybody excited, but consistency has always been the question. The biggest concern is his blocking. For a tight end, that's a huge part of the job. According to his 2025 Pro Football Focus grades, he received a 53.2 pass blocking grade and a 55.5 run blocking grade. Those weren't unusually bad seasons. They've been fairly representative of his overall level throughout his career. Now compare that with newcomer Tyler Conklin. Conklin earned a 73.6 pass blocking grade in 2025 after posting an even better 78.8 mark the year before. Not only is Conklin viewed as the stronger pass blocker, but he's also considered the better receiving tight end. That's already a compelling argument for him to become Detroit's number 2 tight end. Then there are younger options like Miles Kitselman and Zach Horton. Both bring physical run blocking, capable pass protection, and even offer flexibility by lining up at fullback when needed. Versatility is incredibly valuable on game day, especially when every active roster spot matters. And then there's the financial side. Brock Wright is scheduled to make $4.7 million. That's obviously nowhere near Sam Laporta's role or importance, but if Brock ends up as the 3rd tight end, he'd likely become the highest paid number 3 tight end in the entire league. That's a difficult number to justify when there are cheaper players who may offer similar or even greater overall value. Now, to be clear, none of these potential moves would completely shake the foundation of this football team. But Brock Wright would probably generate the biggest reaction from fans because he's become such a familiar face in Detroit. The reality is simple. When you build one of the deepest rosters in the NFL, tough decisions become unavoidable. Someone has to lose a roster spot. And heading into training camp, Levi Onwuzurike, Trevor Nowaski, and Brock Wright are definitely 3 names every Lions fan should be watching very closely. Now let's move to our second story, and this one is a lot more optimistic because it centers around one of the most intriguing additions Detroit made this offseason, Isaiah Pacheco. With training camp now only days away, excitement around this football team continues to build. Fans planning to attend practice have already been circling the calendar, with free training camp tickets going on sale on July 21st at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, and they're expected to disappear quickly. But while everyone is focused on camp, one player quietly has a tremendous opportunity in front of him. After David Montgomery was traded earlier this offseason, the Lions signed Isaiah Pacheco to a fully guaranteed 1-year contract worth $1.81 million. That's an incredibly affordable move for a player who, just a few years ago, looked like one of the NFL's rising running backs. Nobody expects Pacheco to completely replace what Montgomery meant to this offense. That's not really the plan. Instead, Detroit wants him to complement Jahmyr Gibbs, whose explosiveness already makes him one of the league's most dangerous offensive weapons. The biggest question is simple. Which version of Isaiah Pacheco are the Lions getting? If you only look at his 2025 season, the numbers aren't particularly encouraging. After battling injuries, Pacheco never looked like himself. According to Pro Football Focus, he earned an overall grade of 58.6, ranking 54th out of 55 qualifying running backs. His rushing grade was 67.4, ranking 53rd. He finished the season with 118 carries, 462 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and averaged 3.9 yards per carry. Those aren't the numbers Lions fans were hoping to see. Still, there were flashes. He forced 13 missed tackles, averaged 2.8 yards after contact per rushing attempt, and continued to show the violent, physical running style that made him successful earlier in his career. As a receiver, he caught 19 of 26 targets for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. One positive that stands out is ball security. He didn't lose a single fumble. The downside was that he was charged with 4 drops, something he'll certainly want to clean up. But here's why Detroit believes this move could become one of the steals of the offseason. Go back to 2023. Before the injuries started piling up, Isaiah Pacheco looked like one of the better backs in football. He posted an impressive 82.3 overall Pro Football Focus grade, tied for 10th among qualifying running backs. His rushing grade reached 83.7, also ranking 10th, while his 70.8 receiving grade ranked 12th. That season, he rushed 205 times for 935 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 4.6 yards per carry. He also caught 44 of 50 targets for 244 receiving yards, scored another touchdown through the air, and dropped just one pass all season. That's the player Detroit hopes they're signing. Looking at his career as a whole, Pacheco has played 51 games, carrying the ball 576 times for 2,537 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns, averaging 4.4 yards per carry. He's also caught 88 of 105 targets for 415 receiving yards, giving him an outstanding 83.8% catch rate. Across 664 career touches, he's averaged 4.7 yards every time he touches the football. What makes him such an interesting fit in Detroit isn't just the production, it's his playing style. He's a physical downhill runner who attacks between the tackles, plays with relentless energy, embraces contact, and isn't afraid to handle the dirty work. He's also a dependable pass protector, something that should help him earn playing time in offensive coordinator Drew Petzing's offense. And let's not forget something else that matters when you're chasing a championship. Experience. Pacheco won 2 Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs playing under Andy Reid. That championship mindset, playoff experience, and understanding of what it takes to win at the highest level could be valuable inside a Lions locker room that's trying to take that final step toward a Super Bowl appearance. Of course, everything comes back to health. That's the biggest question. If injuries continue to slow him down, this signing probably won't move the needle very much. But if he can stay healthy and look anything like the player we saw in 2023, Detroit may have quietly landed one of the best bargain signings of the entire offseason. The expectation is that he'll settle into a complementary role behind Jahmyr Gibbs, handling around 100 carries, producing roughly 400 rushing yards, and scoring about 5 rushing touchdowns. If he reaches that level while giving Gibbs support and helping keep the offense balanced, this could end up being one of those under-the-radar moves we look back on months from now and say, Brad Holmes did it again. The Lions are no longer fighting just to become competitive. They're fighting over which good players they can actually afford to keep because the roster is so deep. Tough cuts like Levi Onwuzurike, Trevor Nowaski, or even Brock Wright aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of a team with legitimate Super Bowl expectations. At the same time, additions like Isaiah Pacheco show that Brad Holmes is still looking for value wherever he can find it. If Pacheco can stay healthy and rediscover the form he showed earlier in his career, he could become another important piece in an offense that already has one of the most explosive playmakers in Jahmyr Gibbs. This season feels different, and the pressure is higher than ever because this organization believes its Super Bowl window is wide open. Now it's about making the right decisions, staying healthy, and proving that all this talent can finally get Detroit over the hump. If you enjoyed today's update, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Lions Nation Report, and let me know down in the comments. Which potential roster cut would surprise you the most, and how big of a role do you think Isaiah Pacheco will have this season? We'd love to have you join the community as we work toward our first goal of 5,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Lions!